Content warning. This video is not made for kids. It contains fictional depictions of mental illness, fictional violence, and fictional abuse. The fictional characters in this story are heavily afflicted by the things that I have spelled out to you, and some of the inner monologue seems to suggest that they should be getting hurt like this, but that is absolutely not the case. Me portraying this ABUSE, or mental illness, is meant to show the audience how the illness, or ABUSE, feels inside of the mind of the afflicted person, so they can sympathize and maybe stop themselves from following a similar pattern in the future. Be careful if you are easily triggered. You're most likely about to enter the mind of someone who is heavily afflicted by illness and ABUSE. Viewer discretion is advised. Freddie hadn't realized it at the time, but when the managers ditched Jeremy after seeing DJ jump on him, that was the last time the animatronics would come in contact with their tormentors. Somehow, the lack of closure with their managers was just as impactful as all of the pain they had put them through. DJ had certainly made Jeremy pay for what he had done to them, but the rest of the managers? They got away. The satisfaction of Jeremy's retreat was oddly stunted by the lack of a similar punishment being given to the 6 other people who were just as guilty as Jeremy was. A part of Freddie wished that he had done more. But, of course, in the moment, Freddie was more focused on keeping his family away from them than serving their tormentors a fresh dose of karma. In short, he was left feeling empty, and he could tell that the others felt the same. He didn't know enough to accurately state what each individual manager-animatronic relationship was like, but he knew that it was bad, just as bad as Freddie's was with Monroe. And they never got even with them. So now the animatronic family was once again stuck in the Pizzaplex alone, watching as the sunbeams from the ceiling swept their way across the tiled floor, waiting for the outside world to figure out what to do with them. The lights in the arcade were shut off at the moment, the neon now dimmed gray, the cartoonish art on each game contrasted by the darkness that had consumed them. No customers were coming today, so there was no point in wasting the electricity needed to keep the games running. Freddie's spine was stiff and sore, his joints beginning to throb from holding this position for so long. But he did his best to stay motionless. Bonnie was curled up beside him on the floor, his head resting on his shoulder, quietly snoring away. It was so rare for Bonnie to fall asleep that Freddie was determined to let this nap stretch on for as long as possible, meaning that he had to stay perfectly still and pray that Monty wouldn't start breaking things and making a racket in his raceway again. Despite this new freedom of theirs, Freddie had barely seen the others since the interview. They were always either hiding in their room or wandering through their various attractions, effectively keeping him from checking up on them. The program to keep them out of each other's areas was still in effect. The testing chip for that line of code sunk deeply in the port in his throat. He was grateful that it hadn't been converted to his permanent code, but it was still preventing him from making sure the rest of his family was really doing as fine as they were insisting. He knew something was going on. A lot of things Vanessa had said were lies, but not all of them. The restless tingling in his body was only growing worse with each hour that passed, his eyes locked onto the golden square of sunlight that was slowly migrating across the main lobby's floor. It's not just that your family's falling apart. It's that you're letting it happen, Freddie. The memories of what Vanessa had said were haunting him. He found himself staring at the pair of wings that decorated the entrance to Chica's party rooms. His ears picked up on the faint sounds of pots and pans, but it was impossible to discern what was going on in there. The streaking, multicolored lights of the carousel spun in his mind, Vanessa's words boring through him like a power drill. She said something about how Chica would be dead if she actually needed food, that she had a mental breakdown while he hadn't been looking. The inside of his mouth felt like it was burning, urging for him to get up and knock on the door again to try and get more information, but it hadn't worked any other time before, and the last 3 times he had knocked, there hadn't been an answer at all. Everything is just getting so much worse, and you don't care to notice. What about Roxy? What if she was still scared of being replaced, like she said that she was while hanging over the dump? She just wouldn't talk to him about it, acting like she hadn't said anything at all and he was just crazy. What was he doing wrong? What type of father lets that happen in his own home? And Monty, the memory of the crashing and tearing noises from his raceway filled Freddy's mind like chunky sewer water. Just knowing that Monty had anger issues did not suddenly present a solution. Monty didn't like talking to the others, and he didn't want to make Monty even more mad by speaking up. He probably just wanted him to leave him alone. Your family is dying, Freddy. Your one job was to protect and take care of them, but you couldn't even do that. I don't think Bonnie would be too proud of you. Was he doing well with Bonnie? Freddy was just trying to keep him calm while fighting off his insomnia, but sometimes it felt like his efforts were for nothing. How could Bonnie ever recover from what happened to him? Would he ever get him back? Even Sun and Moon concerned him, and he was usually pretty confident that they could take care of each other fine. Freddy was fully aware of how devastating the loss of Vanessa had been on them, but he just didn't know what he could possibly do to alleviate that. Sure, Freddy had gone through the loss of Bonnie, but he never came out the other side. None of them had. And since Bonnie was back now, that pretty much disqualified anything Freddy had to say on the topic. Freddy was obviously upset about her too, but she had been pushing him away as of recently, and he certainly wasn't nearly as close as she had been to Sun and Moon. He had no advice to give Sun and Moon besides, hang in there, things will get better soon, and he was fully aware of how irritating that phrase could be from an outsider that's moderately untouched by the tides of grief. DJ seemed to be the only one that was keeping afloat, seeming satisfied with how things were going and hundreds of times more excited about the future than the others. But Chica, Roxy, Monty, Bonnie, Sun, and Moon... Why won't she tell me what's wrong? Why won't she talk to me? Why won't he let me get close? Why can't I help him? Why don't I know what to do? Freddy wanted to help them so bad that it hurt, but he just wasn't getting anywhere, no matter who he tried. He just wasn't qualified for this. Vanessa was right about him. He was useless. Cowardly and stupid and useless. A tremor ran up his body, and he tensed, listening closely for Bonnie's breathing. It was still even, still somewhat peaceful. What was he ever going to do to fix Bonnie? Could he even do anything? His insomnia had been much easier to deal with before, but after 5 years in the scrap dump, Freddy couldn't imagine the sheer amount of trauma he had gone through, the mere mention of it making him feel sick. Why didn't he do more? Why didn't he check to make sure Bonnie was actually dead? Why did he leave him there? Why did he let the rest of them fall apart? Freddy was just so tired of hearing his own thoughts. They would only go in circles like this endlessly, nothing to distract him but the warmth of Bonnie's head on his shoulder, just waiting and waiting and waiting for someone in the outside world to save them. Briar said that she would be back in a day or two. He trusted her word more than Jeremy's, but that was just because Jeremy was so awful, Freddy would rather be put in the hands of some random drug addict than him. What if Briar was just as bad? He hadn't gotten that impression during the interview, but he already knew that the adults were very good at pretending to be nice. What if she was faking it since they were being recorded? What if she was about to use all of that against them? What if she was going to blame them for her husband's incarceration? What if the new managers she assigned them were even worse than the previous ones? Freddy didn't want it to be true, but he had grown to expect the worst at every turn in his life. He checked his internal clock. 11:43 a.m. Maybe she wouldn't come today. The animatronics had no sense of what was going on in the outside world, and he certainly didn't know how a court worked or how this case would be handled. He just hated that it was becoming more and more frequent for the animatronics to be told that they should just wait until something else happens, instead of being told what exactly the humans were going to do with them. Bonnie's breathing was getting faster. Freddy was instantly on high alert, his thoughts scattering. It only took a few seconds for him to recognize the flickering movement beneath Bonnie's closed eyelids and the twitching in his rust-stained fingers. Freddy's stiffened shoulders creaked as he moved in to hold him tighter, rubbing at Bonnie's upper arm to try and coax him out of the nightmare without waking him up. His efforts were ultimately fruitless, and before he could think of a better strategy, Bonnie jolted awake with a gasp. I'm here, it's okay." Freddy's reassurances were a reflex at this point, no matter how ineffective they seemed to be sometimes. Had he triggered the nightmare somehow? Maybe he had moved? He really wished that he could have let Bonnie sleep some more. Maybe he should have been gentler. You stupid bear, stupid... "She's still not back yet?" Bonnie asked once he had calmed himself. "No, I'm not sure if they're going to come today," Freddy admitted. "I haven't seen anything out the doors." They weren't in view of the exit at the moment, a forest of arcade games blocking the way, but the empty parking lot had been mostly unchanged for the 24 hours they had spent waiting for any news. "Do you think she's..." Bonnie didn't have to finish the sentence for Freddy to understand the worry that infected him. "Even if she's also bad, I won't let her hurt you," Freddy said, doing his best to force confidence into his tone. "I won't let her hurt any of us, okay? I promise. If she's bad too, we'll just have to raise the alarm bell again so the good people outside can help us out some more." Bonnie looked away, making Freddy's gut tie itself into a knot. Did he not sound certain enough? Maybe he should say more, or would that be too much? Should he just distract him somehow? Or would that be condescending? What if Bonnie thought that he didn't want to talk about it, so he avoided sharing his thoughts of him altogether? He didn't want him to feel like he wasn't being heard. Just as Freddy was about to construct a better plan, there was a knock on the door. Freddy jumped hard enough that he nearly dislodged Bonnie. Even though Bonnie's expression showed him that he had also heard the knocking, the two of them still listened with pricked ears to confirm that they hadn't just imagined the noise. Nothing at first. Then a second knock. The doors at the entrance were unlocked. Since the person outside hadn't just barged in like they owned the place, he had a guess as to who it could be. "Do you want to stay here?" Freddy whispered. Bonnie's eyes were fixated on the arcade machines between them and the exit, mouth opening and closing a few times. "No." Freddy stretched a paw out to him, and it took a bit for Bonnie to realize that he was going to have to get up if he wanted to stay with Freddy. Bonnie held on as Freddy hoisted him off of the floor, the ragged purple rabbit practically hiding behind Freddy as he made his way through the arcade games and finally stepped into the sunlight pouring through the classy entrance. Bonnie held on as Freddy hoisted him off of the floor, the ragged purple rabbit practically hiding behind Freddy as he made his way through the arcade games and finally stepped into the sunlight pouring through the glassy entrance. It wasn't just Briar at the door. Freddy and Bonnie froze as the sight of half a dozen strangers came into view. The bright summer hues of the outside world were hiding their facial features in shadow, making it hard to distinguish one from the other. And, of course, Briar was standing there at the front, her curls of dark hair catching flashes of the sunlight. She adjusted her magenta-colored glasses, waving to them with a smile. A smile. It was still so weird to see an adult smiling at him in a way that wasn't passive-aggressive or a thinly veiled threat. Freddy realized that he had been standing there for a couple of minutes like an idiot, hurriedly shaking himself out of it and pushing the door open. Just like that, their new life began. Whether it would be for the better or for the worse, Freddy didn't know at the time. "Oh, thank you. Sorry, I didn't know if I was supposed to just waltz in or not." Briar laughed nervously as she entered, holding the door open for the others. Freddy took several steps back, feeling Bonnie retreating behind him as more strangers filled the front of the arcade. Unfamiliar faces crowded the empty space, a few taking a look around while the others watched him with interest. Briar eventually closed the door, tilting her head as she said, "Good morning, Freddy, and Bonnie?" Bonnie didn't make any signs of life, but Freddy knew that they probably already saw where he was hiding. Sorry, he's kind of... yeah. Freddy sighed anxiously, glancing back to see Bonnie's terrified eyes glowing up at him from the shadows. It's okay, Bonnie. We're not here to hurt you, Briar said gently, closing the distance between her and Freddy. It's nice to see you again. We meant to come earlier, but there was a lot going on today. I've got an hour for a lunch break before I've got to go. Briar was extending her right hand to shake Freddy's paw, and only then was he able to see that the dark mahogany brown shades of her skin ended at her elbow. The rest of her arm, all the way down to her fingertips, was completely bionic. Bionic prosthetics were a technology that humanity had mastered in the last several decades, the ability to connect nerve endings to circuits, creating nearly endless possibilities for medical advancements. It was still expensive, but no longer impossible. Freddy had come into contact with a surplus of kids with similar features, like a bionic eye or bionic leg, but by far the most expensive and complicated prosthetics were the ones that replicated a hand. Just like the first time he had seen Briar's bionic arm in Lost and Found, he was impressed by how well it had been made. The white silicone molded smoothly to fit the rest of her arm, the segmented joints of the fingers, giving her mobility just as effective as Freddy's robotic hands. He heard that the missing limb had something to do with the incident that had closed down SeaWorld, but Jeremy hadn't let him know enough about his personal life to understand what exactly his wife had gone through. When he realized he was staring, he quickly took her hand to shake it, hoping that she didn't think that he was being creepy or weird about it. It was just really interesting to see a human having a limb that was nearly identical to the parts that made up himself and his family. Thank you for coming. Freddy cleared his throat, trying to gather himself. The others are in their rooms. I can go get them. Freddy turned and whispered for Bonnie to start walking, escaping the mass of strange faces as they backtracked through the arcade and found themselves in the sunlit lobby. Gathering the others took longer than expected. Freddy heard a lot of clatters and thumps when he knocked on Chica's door, but she eventually poked out with a forced grin, one that dropped when she spotted the strangers in the lobby. Roxy was the same, her spike of anxiety obvious despite the casual self-assurance she tried to portray with her raised chin and squared shoulders. A loud crash ended whatever Monty was doing in his raceway, the gator carefully peeking out the door before retreating again when he saw the strangers. While Monty joined the others, Freddy knocked on the daycare's double doors a few times. He didn't get a response, so he retrieved DJ from the auditorium and tried again with the daycare. Moon yelled something about how Sun was trying to sleep, but when he heard the reason behind the intrusion, he snapped to alertness and switched of Sun so they could file in line beside the others in the brightly lit main lobby. As Freddy took position in front of his family, each of them wore a wildly different expression. Chica was frozen in fear, while Roxy was protectively standing in front of her like she thought the strangers were about to pull a gun on them. Monty's face was nearly unreadable, some sort of variation of defensive nervousness. Sun was standing there with a much too wide smile, trying to act like everything going around him was perfectly normal, but DJ's smile was genuine. He was probably the only one that was happy to meet their new managers. Though Freddy didn't want to be rude, he understood his family's apprehension. It wasn't that they wanted their old managers back. It was that they were scared that these new ones would be worse. The last time they had changed managers, it hadn't exactly ended up well. Okay, that's everyone, Freddy said, painfully aware that Bonnie was hunkered behind him in a way that perfectly mirrored his own anxiety. Alright, first things first, let's get those things off of you, Briar began, but whatever she had said was immediately obliterated when the new managers raised identical remotes. It was as if they had thrown a grenade at them. Bonnie shrieked and fell to the tiles with a heavy clang while Freddy tumbled backwards away from the managers. Monty and Roxy started hollering, "No, please!" while Chica burst into tears and Sun dropped to the floor in anticipation of the shock. DJ rose above them and slammed his hands down in between them and the managers, already ripping off one of his gloves and preparing to do the same thing that he had done to Jeremy. Wait, stop! We're not shocking you! It's okay, we're not going to use them! Even though the strangers were saying that to them, the panic that had overcome the animatronics was too much to break through. Drop them! Drop the remotes! Briar turned to the new managers, who all quickly did as she said, showing their now empty hands and stepping away from the awful buttons. "We're not going to shock you. We were just going to remove the collars," Briar called out to them, holding her hands up to show DJ that she wasn't about to betray them. "It's okay. Everyone calm down, please. We weren't going to use them." It took a few repetitions of that for Freddy to register that they weren't in danger. Air rushed in and out of the tanks in his chest as he tried to keep from overheating, glancing back to the others. Most of them were on the floor, but just like Freddy, they were peeking out from behind their hands, their hyperventilation slowing down as they recognized what was going on. DJ huffed out a heavy sigh, putting the glove back on. He lifted his hands and leaned back to the position he had held before, giving a few gentle chords to try and reassure the others that it was safe. "I'm sorry. Oh God, I'm so sorry," Briar stammered out, still showing her palms to them. I didn't realize that would freak you guys out that much. I'm so sorry." Freddy kneeled down beside Bonnie, nudging at his shoulder. Bonnie was shaking uncontrollably in the fetal position, his face completely hidden between his elbows, each raspy breath getting tighter than the last. It's okay. They weren't going to use it," Freddy whispered to him, trying to sit him back up. Bonnie uncurled himself enough to hide in Freddy's embrace, his rusted body trembling so bad Freddy was worried he would damage himself. The rest of the world dimmed as Freddy went through the all-too-familiar process of bringing him down out of this. You're all right. They weren't going to use the collars. They're not going to use them anymore." Freddy tucked Bonnie's head beneath his chin, his gaze returning to Briar. She was covering her mouth with her non-bionic hand, her eyes glossy as she watched the effect all of this had on them. And the other strangers were the same, looks of shame and regret passed between them. It was so weird. He had expected masks of uninterested apathy at best and smirking amusement at worst. I'm so sorry. I should have explained before pulling those things out," Briar said, brushing a strand of curly hair behind her ear. "I'm going to get rid of the collars. We just need to use the remotes to deactivate them and get them to let go of you. Is it okay if we do that?" It took several moments of staring down at her for him to realize that she was being genuine. He didn't detect any malicious trickery or feigned friendliness in her watery eyes. "Yes, of course," Freddy nodded, a flutter of hope rising in his chest. He stayed down on the floor as Briar slowly picked the remote back up with her forefinger and thumb, placing it flat on her bionic palm to make it clear that she wasn't about to even come close to pressing the button. Instead, she pulled a slitted switch on the side, causing a small toothed prong to poke itself out the front. "Can I?" she asked, but Freddy was already agreeing. He lifted his chin so she could get to the collar, the presence of the remote making his fur stand on end like he could already feel the electrical shock the button could unleash on him. Instead, though, she inserted the prong at the back of his collar, turning it almost like a key. Then, with a small click, the collar disengaged and fell off. It hit the tiles with a dull plunk, cold air seeping into the new empty space on his throat. Freddy touched the bare spot on his neck, a thrill twirling its way up his spine and letting a smile blossom over his face. It was gone. It was really gone. Thank you. The others, Freddy said, moving aside and urging Bonnie to go next. After a click, his collar disengaged and fell beside his knees. It was such a simple action, but it meant the entire world to him. Bonnie stared down at the horrible thing, his fingers brushing against the flattened-out fur on his neck, slowly realizing that he would never have to wear it again. "Should we do the rest?" one of the strangers asked. "No, don't touch the remotes. I'll just do it," Briar said. Once Briar had taken Suns off, he took several steps back from the deactivated collar, as if he was worried that it would come to life and scuttle up his leg. Monty kicked his collar far away from himself once it was off, Roxy and Chica shuffling away from theirs too. DJ rested his chin on the ground when Briar approached him, patiently waiting as she stretched up to reach the back of his collar. DJ's disengaged with a loud hiss and a thud, nearly cracking the tiles beneath it when he lifted his head to escape its grasp. DJ stared at his deactivated collar for several long moments, the hefty black ring of metal lying there like a dead spider. He poked at his freed neck, his fingers initially curling back as if he was scared that he would find the collar still there. When he found nothing binding him, his hand fully rubbed at the bare spot, a smile bubbling up over DJ's face. "Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you," he signed again and again to Briar, who was backing up with satisfaction. Freddy could hardly believe it. Nothing had ever felt so good. He wanted to bounce around to cheer at the top of his lungs, to hold his family and feel their bare necks and stay with them until he finally convinced himself that they would never ever be hurt like that again. Free. They were free. "Okay, now that we've got that done," Briar said, returning to the group of strangers and gesturing to them with her metal hand. "These are going to be your new managers." The group of strangers all waved, the sheer amount of them making it a little difficult to process each of their individual features. Freddy searched their expressions for any hint of hidden vileness, but each were politely keeping back from the animatronics, waiting for Briar to introduce them. Oliver, you should probably go first so you can translate for him," Briar said, turning to talk to one of the strangers behind her. The man she was addressing stepped out of the group. Now that he was more isolated in one spot, it was easier to distinguish him from the others. His curly black hair was tied into a bun at the back, his colorful beaded necklace clattering as he moved. He introduced himself with a quick, "Hey," and then signed in perfect ASL to DJ. "Hello, my name is Oliver Ellis, and I'm going to be your new manager. Do you remember me?" Freddy took notice that Ellis had painted his fingernails pink, making it a lot easier to see each individual finger as he spoke. DJ nodded, signing back to him jokingly. "Yeah, of course I remember you. I'm not a goldfish." Ellis laughed and circled around the other animatronics, settling in place beside DJ, who was already excitedly signing to him questions of how he was doing. Freddy was surprised to see an adult that was actually capable of communicating with DJ. None of the previous managers had known ASL and would constantly struggle to convey orders to him, often shocking him for getting it wrong. Already, this was hundreds of times better than anything DJ had been given before. Ellis began to translate for DJ so he could listen in as Briar introduced the remaining managers. I know that Bonnie kinda didn't have a manager for the last week or so, but I decided to get one for him since it seems like he needs a little bit more help," Briar went on, guiding another person out of the group. "Bonnie, this is Gale Whitson. He's going to try and take care of you, okay?" Freddy, and undoubtedly every other animatronic here, immediately recognized Whitson. Over a decade ago, Whitson had been given a birthday party at the Pizzaplex. Normally, their memories weren't good enough to recognize someone that specific, but the feature that helped make a bigger imprint on their memories was the fact that Whitson was albino. His curly, bright white hair reflected the sunlight like puffy clouds, his pale skin and cherry pink eyes mixing perfectly with the buttercup yellow of his polo shirt. A thin, dark magenta flannel was tied around his waist, nearly covering his neat blue jeans. Bonnie's hold on Freddy's arms loosened slightly as Whitson took a few steps closer. "Gale?" Bonnie croaked out. "Oh, you remember me?" Whitson's face lit up. "Yeah." The light in Bonnie's eyes flickered a little. "It was so long ago, but you won the tournament, right?" The mention of the tournament made a vague memory unlock itself from the back of Freddy's mind. Whitson liked the bowling alley so much that he ended up convincing all of his friends to participate in a sort of unofficial tournament that they had invented. Bonnie hadn't been able to stop talking about it after Whitson's birthday was over, so happy to see all the kids so excited about competing against each other in bowling. Whitson's polite smile widened into a chuckle. "Yep, that was me. I'm surprised you remember me after all this time. How could I have forgotten you? You were able to beat me." Bonnie was smiling. He was actually smiling. Warmth filled Freddy's chest, cherishing this new happiness that Bonnie had been given. He let Whitson settle closer to the two of them, the tightness between his shoulder blades fading away. Now that Whitson was closer, Freddy took notice of two new details that he had to focus not to visibly react to. The first was a simple silver locket, winking in the light of the sun. The second was a prominent scar slashed across Whitson's throat. It seemed that doctors had tried the best that they could to let the injury heal, but whatever had happened to Whitson still left an obvious pink line dragged across his jugular. Questions popped around Freddy's head, but he made sure not to stare. "Not my business," he reminded himself. "Don't be rude." "And, this is Irene Lopez," Breyer went on, pulling another one from the group. "She's going to be Monty's new manager." A long black braid draped over the woman's back, a stark contrast to the rosy peach color of her sleek jacket. As she crossed the distance between herself and Monty, she kept her movements slow and delicate, stopping before she got too close and raising her hand to shake his. "Hello, Monty," she greeted. Her voice was surprisingly soft, such a stark contrast to Huxley that it seemed to unnerve Monty. Monty lowered his head, shuffling back a few inches before taking her hand and awkwardly slipping out of her grasp as quick as he could. Lopez settled in a spot outside of his personal space, while Monty's claws wound together, his tail tucking closer around his ankles. He didn't seem to know how to react at all, which Freddy guessed was expected. "All right, and this is Beckett," Breyer continued. "She is going to be Roxy's new manager." A heavy-set woman with a pixie cut was pulled into view, her crooked nose and chipped tooth adding a rough charm to her figure. One half of her short-trimmed hair was a natural black shade, while the other half was a deep purple, a color pulled down out of a midnight sky. Her black tank top showed off the tattoo engraved into her muscular upper arm, easily drawing onlookers' attention. It was a jagged pattern that spiraled out of a circular midpoint, hooking its way around her bicep until its jagged edge finally came to a point across the top of her forearm. The tattoo was made of inky violet and indigo colors that matched the piercings in her ears, catching everyone's eye no matter where in the room they were positioned. At first, Roxy's tail fluffed out as Beckett made her way towards her, but after tilting her head in confusion, her ears shot back up as she said, "Oh, you're Bree." "Yep, that's me." Beckett bounded through the last few steps. "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you remember me." Roxy seemed to be struggling to decide how she should be acting in the moment. Her tail was wagging, but she still seemed determined to retain her composure, her smile curling up over her face no matter how hard she tried to keep her cool. You've played with Ethan before, right?" Beckett asked. Roxy drew back, taking in a breath. "Wait, is he yours?" "Yes!" Beckett jumped up excitedly. I knew he would love the laser tag arena as much as I did. I take him here as often as I can." Roxy seemed rather taken aback, glancing back at the others before straightening up and trying to quiet down. "All right, now we got Zoe Paisley, Chica's manager," Breyer said. There were only 2 people left, and the one that she was pointing out was a small, thin woman with dark, velvety maroon hair that fell over both shoulders like twin waterfalls of wine. The inside of her dark pink coat was filled with fake fur, the bulk of it far exceeding the skinnier structure of her waist and legs, like she had wrapped herself up inside of an entire cougar. Chica poked up from behind Roxy, already reaching to shake Paisley's hand as she approached. "It's nice to meet you, Chica," Paisley chirped. "I don't think that you actually know me like a lot of the others do, but I hope I can still help you out." Chica just nodded, keeping her eyes on the floor, as if unsure what to say next. "And the last one is Sun and Moon's new manager, Murray," Breyer said, stepping back to show them the final stranger. Murray was at least a head taller than Breyer, his older age displayed by his curls of snowy white hair that contrasted with the dark, leathery tone of his skin. The wrinkles around his eyes squished as he gave a warm smile, making his way over to Sun and reaching out a callous, roughened hand. Sun shook his hand, the same reflexive grin still forcing itself on his features, making his true emotions unreadable. "I'm actually Breyer's dad," Murray explained, the deep rumble of his voice soothing to the ears. "My little girl was hoping that I could help you out during this time. I promise I'll try my best." Sun nodded, the pointed tips of his rays slowly retracting further into his head, giving away the uneasiness behind his mask-like smile. Freddy blinked a few times, glancing back to the others and then leaning to see if there was someone else behind Breyer. Yeah, Pryor said, picking up on his confusion. I'm going to act as your manager, Freddy. I'm pretty sure I don't want to just sit in an office and sort papers around if I could actually be helping out during the day. And, it might be hard to afford yet another animatronic caretaker, so I had to be resourceful. Do you think that's alright? Yeah. Freddy relaxed, feeling Bonnie's thumb rub the back of his hand. That can work. Everyone here is kind of a mix of family friends and people that others have recommended, Briar explained to all of them, her voice projecting far into the lobby. So I really hope that they'll be able to help you recover from what Jeremy has been doing to you. Freddy caught a flash of guilt pass over Briar's features. He immediately understood what must be going on inside of her head. She felt guilty she hadn't done more sooner. The fizzing restlessness inside of Freddy began to throb louder, the windows above him only barely keeping the outside world from crashing down on them. So, what's going to happen now? Freddy asked, hoping that he didn't sound too impatient. Do we just get back to work? Are we reopening tomorrow? Right now, all of you are sort of on break, Briar replied, the clap of her hands making an odd thunk noise due to the bionic limb. I don't think it's a very good idea to force you guys back into a working environment right now. I mean, the 28th was a living nightmare, and you clearly need to rest and recover before being put to work again. We're just gonna take the week off? Sana asked slowly, an eye twitching. Well, not just a week, Briar said. The break will just be however long you need it to be. You could take a whole year off for all that I care, just as long as you guys are comfortable enough to continue once you decide that it's time to reopen. It took Freddy a few moments to digest that information. A break. They were being given a break. A real break. What will we do until then? Chica's voice crept up from the back of the group. Rest, Briar replied simply. Just take off time for yourself. Talk to your new managers about what's going on, how you feel. All of them are qualified to be therapists. You don't have to open up to them immediately, but I promise they can help. The rest of the mall will still be open, but the main lobby here will be closed down until you guys are ready to start working again. This concept, in and of itself, was one of the most bizarre things they had ever been faced with. They were going to choose when they go back to work. He was so used to being told when he can and can't rest. The idea that the new managers would take their feelings into account felt alien to him. Does that all sound good? Briar asked. Yeah, it does, Freddy stammered in disbelief, the others all nodding in unison. Okay, good then. Briar beamed at them all, turning backwards and pointing a bionic thumb over her shoulder. I need to get back to the divorce court soon, but the rest of you guys can just stay here and get acquainted. Wait! She stopped, listening intently. The desperate emptiness that Freddy had been feeling before began to bubble to the surface. He was worried that Briar would get mad if he requested anything more from her, but if he didn't ask her now, he would just end up thinking about it non-stop until their next interaction. We have a sort of testing chip in our ports right now, Freddy explained, gesturing to the inside of his mouth. It stops us from entering each other's areas. Is it okay if we have that removed? Stops you from... Briar trailed off, then shook herself and nodded. Oh, yes, of course. You guys start doing that, okay? The fact that she was so quick to agree was a delightful surprise. She was listening. Their boss was actually listening to them. As the remaining managers turned to their animatronic to begin removing that chip, Freddy could glimpse a shining beacon of hope in the future, filling him with life that he thought had died out long ago. Maybe this time his family really was in good hands. Woo! Yay! We're finally getting to the therapy part of the rewrite! Yay! I don't have to write them suffering anymore. Well, I mean, there will be a little bit, but it's going to be in the context of them going through therapy, so woo! I'm so excited. Oh my gosh, I'm so tired. It's so early. Okay, so, the next episode will come out 2 weeks from now, just like normal, and, oh, before you leave, make sure to comment about the video, like, about your favorite part, or just saying hi, or whatever, it doesn't really matter, and also liking the video. It really helps me out, and I love being able to see people appreciating my work, and it's gonna be able to get me, like, further out in the algorithm and stuff, so any sort of help is appreciated, so thank you so much for all of your support, it means the world to me. Thank you for liking and commenting and everything and staying for this long, so, I think that's all I have to say, really. Bye, see you in 2 weeks, hope you enjoyed the video.